in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 184. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Dawson Tire and Wheel, your premier ag tire and wheel provider in North America, helping people grow. Tractorzoom delivering insights, and Dryshod Boots, the official work boot of the Moving Iron Podcast. And I'm sure today, Aaron, when you're out working on those feed bunks and your sheep pens, you could use a pair of those Dryshod boots.
Yeah. Other than, I think, doing that job, your feet might become stew.
I can imagine. That'd be kind of warm.
I wasn't building them in standing water, so.
Yeah, I can imagine it'd be a little hot out there today. What's the temperature there in the lines today?
80.
Yeah, we're a little warmer out here in the Greater Scottsbluff Metroplex. I think we're closer to like 85ish, maybe something like that. So, well, yeah. Right. So how you been since we talked last? It's been a couple weeks.
Good. Just begging and pleading and doing what I can to keep some iron moving, man. That's about it. That's the name of the game.
Yeah, it's getting a little more tricky than normal, but guys are actually starting to kind of perk their ears up a little bit. I think they realize that this, especially since corn got past 320, so now it's up into the 330s. They're halfway back in the game.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's things have been turning around, but I guess when you take a look at what's been going on around you here in the last couple weeks here, what are you seeing happen out there?
I just kind of what you said about ears perking up and whatnot. There last week, April, first 2 weeks of May, it was pretty damn quiet, and things started kind of perking up, and then it's been, pretty steady since. So I think once everybody's out of the field and kind of looking on to the next step, and we probably need these, and let's look at one of these, and guys turn the page and back into forward thinking, and a lot of times that involves change in machinery. So I think that's kind of where we're at, and just keep working at it. That's about all I can tell you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing too. I mean, just watching what's happening with our sales guys in the territory and those kind of things. There's plenty of stuff going on. We got plenty of quotes out there. We got plenty of people kicking tires. We got plenty of people, taking delivery of machines and those kind of things. So it just feels like to me there's obviously caution. If you take a look at last year this time, there wasn't a whole lot going on right now either, right? Not like this by any means, but it wasn't nearly as active as it was. And then June, July came around and things started kind of making some turns and kind of made our way towards the end of the year, and if things finished out pretty good. So I'm still pretty optimistic about the end of the year and what things look like, but I think there's definitely an opportunity for things where we need to make sure that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's and keeping our best foot forward with these guys.
Yep. Yeah, because when it all opens up, corn's going to go $6. So.
I don't know if it'll quite go to $6, but
hold on near that, boys. Here we go.
Yeah, that would be a very quick transition there. Go from double in price here by the next couple months. That'd be something else. So last week I had Alan Hoskins on here, and on Moving Iron Podcast number 183, it was called Trading the Recon and Depreciation Curve. And the reason I had Alan on here, Alan's one of those bankers out there that I really have a lot of respect for, and honestly, he does a really good job of keeping things real, and making sure that things move in a good, solid direction. So I wanted to have Aaron on to talk about kind of, the whole depreciation curve and reconditioning curve as far as pricing equipment and how that affects equipment from the equipment guy standpoint. So, Aaron, let's just jump in there. So let's pick on our favorite thing here, combines. We love picking on those things. And if you there's in any equipment, doesn't matter what it is, there is a certain time in the cycle of its life that reconditioning costs will eventually outweigh the depreciation cost, and obviously there's vice versa, right? So there's depreciation that's going to outweigh reconditioning. So let's just start doing this. Let's start with the depreciation schedule first and take a look at that end of the curve, and then let's talk about the other side of the reconditioning cost of where we're going. So there's this idea that I think amongst some folks that there's hour ranges and slots, and when you get to these hour ranges and slots, that doesn't really matter what the hour range is. If it's between A and B, it's the same deal, right? And typically when people talk about machineries, they break them into 250 to 500 hour kind of increments, right? And there is that 0 to 500 hour range, which to me is way too broad to start breaking equipment out, whether it's combines, tractors, four-wheel drive, it doesn't matter, right? I think it's entirely too much.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. That needs split in half, because 250 is a whole different animal with 500.
Right. Yep. Because
very much so on the combine and even on tractors.
Yeah. Because there's guys out there that won't buy we have some new buyers out, or used buyers out there that want to buy a new machine but not pay a new machine price, and they get that. So they want a machine with under 300 hours on it. They're not going to buy it if it's got 350 on it or 325. You better have 299 or less, right? And it's a big deal, because when they think to them, like, that 299 is even that 249 or 269 number, the mental gap, or not gap, the mental jump that they have to make to get to that next level to them is, well, that's to them, that's a whole nother season of use type of idea in their head. It's a whole nother, I don't put that many hours on it in a year, so now I'm in a worse situation than I was before. On the 750 hour machine that I'm trading in, I've had for 5 years, type of thing. Talk about that a little bit. Talk about when you're looking at those machines out there, and you're talking to your wholesale guys or your end user buyers that call you from all over North America. Talk about that scenario a little bit and how you look at that machine from a depreciation curve standpoint and from a reconditioning curve standpoint.
Okay. Well, not to burst everybody's bubble, I am a long ways from a depreciation expert. Quite honestly, what I have noticed in the last 20 years of this business is everybody's different. I mean, as far as the depreciation side of it.
Right.
Going off of your depreciation schedule, every farm is different. Okay?
Exactly.
So there's two factors in depreciation here that we're looking at. One is the guy's balance sheet depreciation. Mm-hmm. The other is dealership, the physical iron losing value depreciation.
Right. Yep.
When it goes to the balance sheet, that's everybody their own thing. I bet 10 guys have 9 different, scenarios. As far as the machine itself, to piggyback on what you said with the 0 to 5, regardless of what it is, that's a whole different ball game. But when you go over 5, then you start going in 500 increments. Mm-hmm. 5 to 1,000, 1,000, 15, 15 to 2. Then after 2, you start widening again.
Right.
If you take and I'm talking tractors right now, or hell, even combines. Say you got 2,000 step on a combine or 2,900 step on a combine, they'll make a hell of a lot of difference.
Yep, I agree with that.
In all reality. on.
Yeah,
it's going to make more difference there. Right. It's not for the difference in hours that are there. It's not, we're talking a third of the machine's working history.
Right.
And it's not a big giant cliff by any means. And on tractors, it's even narrower. If I'm looking at a 2,200-hour tractor, a 2,900-hour tractor, or a medium-sized guy, depending on what job it does, that might be a season of use. For a smaller guy, hell, that might be 2 seasons of use.
Right.
But from farm equipment, machinery is a commodity, to quote the wise Casey Seymour. When it's a commodity like that, it's just cut and dry,
Yeah.
There's a difference between 22 and 29, but there's not a hell of a lot, man.
Right. Yep.
And I would venture to guess that, if you took 20 of those tractors over the course of 9 months, where they sell is going to be pretty damn close throughout that whole package.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then like you were saying about the guy, the used buyer that wants to buy new, for the 200-hour guys, there are guys that love that stuff because they're not taking the initial hit.
Right.
It's close enough to new. I mean, good Lord, 200 hours.
Right.
That's nothing. Also, I've noticed more often than not, those guys are kind of a medium-sized farmer too,
mm-hmm.
and they're not going to put 1,000 hours on that tractor in a year, but they're going to do, say it's planting tractor, maybe a little grain cart, but not a lot of grain cart. They're 300-hour-a-year guy.
Right.
Well, they had someone take a year off for them, and the difference in dollars to new versus where they got it is a huge difference to them. Maybe not, I was going to say maybe not from the commodity standpoint, but there is still, there always is. When we trade for something that new, we struggle a hell of a lot more on that than we do anything else.
Right.
What's the right number?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you look at, guys doing big multi-unit deals that are rolling that stuff every year, that is a huge chore to go, okay, how far back of new does it have to be?
Right.
And then you think you're right, you look again, oh, some more stuff has popped up, that's too high. Some more stuff. It's constantly evolving, and at least to me, that's all I do is used equipment every damn day of the week. But to me, taking that almost new stuff, man, I just beat my head against the wall with that.
Yeah.
That is so hard to peg. Cheap enough that they'll buy used instead of new, but you're not stealing it because, quite frankly, you can't.
Right.
Take him 10 seconds to call another dealer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of hard. But the good thing about it being hard, if you do get it figured out, you do get zeroed in on it, that stuff is great stuff to have around.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the whole thing. So the flip side of that, depreciation side of it is some folks are chasing a machine down to where they know where that first real reconditioning number comes in at. And obviously on a tractor,
yep,
a row crop tractor or a four-wheel drive or something like that, that number is a really big number when it comes to hours, right? You're like 5,000 hours. I mean, you got to change tires, right? That's when you've hit that first big number, right? Obviously, when you, some of these anymore, to do a complete service on these machines is not exactly cheap either, but
no joke.
You can put a kid through college on some of the stuff.
Change oil in this. That'll be $2,500. What?
Yeah, it's kind of it's very expensive to do. Like when you hit that 750
and
hour
from a
service mark.
dealership standpoint, real quick, from dealership standpoint, when they call and say, hey, do you want us to look this over? And I'm like, I don't even want you to wash the damn thing because I know you're going to charge me for it.
Yeah. But they have, most guys I've been noticing here of late are really paying attention to that first real reconditioning moment, right? And that's for a combine,
Right.
That's 750 hours, right? When you get to that first 750 hours, that's the first most expensive time that you hit, right? Because you're looking at majority of your wear parts at that point have hit time to replace them. You're looking at some bearings that need to be replaced. You've got some just components, not necessarily not engines and transmission, those kind of things, but just components that are.
Yeah.
You've hit a point now where you can do some serious reconditioning, right? So,
Right.
to me, when I look at that,
Well, and that too, Casey, that depends where you're at and what you're doing.
that's true.
You
That's true.
can't, you can't broad stroke that too much. Now, if we're talking corn and bean guys in the Midwest,
Yep.
that's pretty accurate because they're all doing 300 bushel corn and 70 bushel beans, and
Right.
that is a lot of material wearing that sumbitch out.
Right. If you're cutting dryland wheat in western Kansas, you got 750 hours on your machine, that's a whole different 750 hours, right?
Yeah, it still has paint on the augers.
That's right. That's a good point. That is true. But for the most part, 750 hours is a time to make a decision on what you're going to do with the machine moving forward, right? So now you are at,
Right.
Okay, so now you've hit probably the most expensive part of your depreciation curve, right, from 0 to 750 hours, right? You've reached that point. And then now you're also at, okay, so now I've taken the depreciation off of it, and I've felt that. Do I want to spend the next 25 grand of this machine, or whatever the number is, to run this combine through the shop and fix the elevator chain, the unloading augers, the bubble augers, those different things like that are wearing out, that are at a point where you probably need to think about doing some stuff with it. Is the juice worth the squeeze to do that again? Some guys it's yes, because just from a sheer dollar and cent standpoint, it's cheaper to do the $25,000 thing than it is to, they're probably 3 years into a 5-year note type of deal, so they got some decent equity, so they could make a move if they wanted to, type of thing. But to me, I think that's the best time to trade a combine. Is if you have a combine from 0 to 750 hours and you hit that point, I would be trading it at about 600 hours. Just because the standpoint of 650 hours, something like that you still have enough juice left in the tank that somebody could go out and run it for 150 hours. A smaller operator could go out and put 100 hours on it or something like that, and not hit that transition point. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that to a point. Just like everything we're discussing, it depends on the operation,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Now, is that guy a 1-year-old buyer? Is he a new buyer? That all comes into play. If he's a new buyer, I would say bail out before that. Bail out at 5.
Yep.
If it fits you, I did a Twitter poll last year, just curious nationwide, and the 250 to 300 is a season of use. That result was, like 75% of guys that voted. So there's your 500 to 600. Now, if that guy's a new buyer, absolutely bail out there. 2 years. I don't think you need to do it every year. I think it's more cost effective to run those 2 years than to just be, all right, time to trade. Now, custom guys, if you can do it every year, by God, do it every year,
Right.
And most of those guys, if they were to stop, take a year off, and I'm talking big, say 6+ combine guys.
Yeah.
Those guys, if they would jump out of that multi-unit and go to every 2 years, is probably for that. Now that is an odd scenario, but for those guys, it's probably not cost effective to do that. It's probably considerably higher to go that route than to do their, multi-unit fleet thing every year and boom, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some
if it's a guy that buys a 1-year-old, I would say for him at least $750 to maybe $8, maybe $1,000. You buy a 250, 300, you're on it to $1,000.
Right. Yep. That's why I think the second guide comes into play right there. What you just said.
Right.
Yep.
When I started in this business years ago, there was 2 big ass kickings on a combine. It was always about 800 or so. Once you get to 800, start checking orders. And then the other one was like 15.
Right. Yep.
Well, just like we talked on, it was sometime this spring about nobody that makes a combine is trying to make them thinner. Okay?
Right.
Nobody is doing that.
Right. Yep.
And that being the case, it used to be like, say, 900, 1,500. Now it's 700, maybe even before that. And there's no way after that first go-around you're making it to 15. Now it's 13.
Right.
And that's just because of bushels.
Right.
If you look at 20 years ago, hours on a combine, or today, hours on a combine, it's not like the clock counts different. The hours are still the hours.
Right.
But you're shoving a third more material through that damn combine, man.
Yep.
So, there again, then you look at, we're mostly all corn. Okay, awesome. Corn by itself is the easiest crop to thresh, easiest to separate. It's just so easy on a combine as far as working. Now, as far as wear, there you go. 300 bushel corn wears the shit out of a combine because everything is packed full of yellow all day, every day.
Right.
And it has no choice but to wear out.
Yep. Yeah, there's the mindset of where do you price that machine at, and where do you get the customer to start thinking about trading, so that either it's the second guy coming off of that 500-hour guy or the 750-hour guy, where that second guy comes into play, or is it the fifth, like you're talking about, the 1,500-hour thing? Where does that fourth or fifth guy come into play? And then at that point, if you start,
third guy,
the third guy is kind of stuck in the middle there. I mean, he's like that. He's the guy that wants to trade his 2,000 hours in on 1,000 hours, right? That's what he's kind of stuck in the middle there, somewhere between those two scenarios. The guy that gets the machine that's got 1,500 hours on it, or 2,000 separator hours on it, or something like that. That guy, depreciation is not. I mean, that's other than just a fancy lingo term that you use with your tax accountant. Depreciation isn't an issue, right? You're talking about a machine that hits a point in time when every year you got $10,000 or $15,000. I mean, every single year, because there's something different wearing out, right? Everything's on a different time clock, and it's just, unless you take the whole combine from feeder house to chopper and just gut it and put all brand new stuff in there, which I was in Ukraine, I saw a guy doing that. They were doing like a frame off overhaul on this combine, and but they're going to make it brand new. Unless you do that, I mean, you're going to have this over here and that over there, and this is over here and this over here, and this year you got to do this, and next year you got to do that. I mean, that guy right there, but he's also the same guy. He's not putting 400 hours a year on his machine. He's putting 100 hours a year on his machine. So that reconditioning lasts a hell of a lot longer. Yeah, or two. And that reconditioning cost that he's spending, that's an every other year thing, and not every single year, depending on what they do, right? But it's not an every single year that you're going to do that But we got guys too that'll be like, yeah, I'll take that 1,500-hour machine. I'm going to plan on putting 400 hours on it, and by this time next year, I'll have close to 3,000 hours on it. And I'm like, do you want that one?
Yeah.
It's going to cost you more to have that, irregardless of what your payment is. It's going to cost you more to have that than it is for you to have a 2-year-old machine or a 3-year-old machine. And actually, you're going to spend about the same amount of money between what it costs you to recondition it, depreciation, and what your payment is. That 2 or 3-year-old machine is going to cost you about the same. It's just going to be less reconditioning costs.
Which at that point, I know guys that are pretty decent-sized farmers, and they buy the 1,500, 2,000 combine, and they could buy the 1-year-old, hell, they could buy new. But they run, instead of one, they run a couple.
Yep.
And the biggest reason they do that is because they're always looking to expand, right?
Right.
And they do their own mechanicing in the winter, all that kind of stuff. They don't want the $300,000 combine on their balance sheet. They want $150.
Yeah.
Because as they're aggressive and expanding and all that, they need the least amount on there they can, but still be functional.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I mean?
But I think that's a short-sighted view on that recondition and depreciation curve. They're doing that for their banker, right? The banker's the one saying to them,
right,
have the $150,000, which is so much better, right? Well, instead of having a $70,000 payment, right, and $5,000 worth of reconditioning costs, we now have a $40,000 payment, and they've got anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 worth of reconditioning work they're doing. Even though they're doing their own work and they're cutting out the labor part of it and those kind of things, I mean, it's still there. But the point I'm making is you're still spending the same amount of money. And for the number of conversations that I've had with guys, it's like reconditioning doesn't count on the balance sheet with some of these people. You know what I mean? Right. And that's sad that there's bankers out there that are telling people that don't worry about that. That's the same thing I brought up with Alan last week. I'm like, Alan, I see this and I hear this all the time that, my bank said not to buy anything because my combine's paid for and I don't have a payment right now. I was like, you have a payment. It's called the shop bill. And that's a payment.
Right.
That's a cash outlay. Whether it's a payment or a shop bill, it's a cash outlay. So you need to mitigate that to the best of your ability. And I get.
Doesn't matter what you call it, money is leaving.
Right. It's a cash cash flow thing going out. So why not take a look at what you have? And every situation is different. I'm kind of broad stroking this right now, and I get that. But the thing about it is you might be gaining. Take your S670 and go buy a 2 or 3 year newer S680, right? Or maybe get into that 780 or something like that. But you're increasing your ability to do more on your farm. You're gaining the capacity if you're thinking about growing, and that's what goal of yours. You're gaining the capacity by just going up a class in combine, right? Now, granted, there's other things that go along with that, grain carts and trucks and those kind of things that all support equipment and all those things that play into that. But at the end of the day, you're gaining efficiencies with just having a newer machine, right? You're getting more efficient because there's theoretically less downtime.
The only thing I agree with that. The only thing I would interject there is, I know combines eat up a lot of money in the shop, and if you want to, you can spend $30 on one.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, dealing with guys I've dealt with through the years, and you kind of hit on it for just a second before, when you have that 15-2 combine, and you buy that machine, and it's had its $750 overhaul, and it's had its $1,300 overhaul, that even the guy putting the parts in puked at the dollars and cents on the ticket on that deal.
Yeah.
But typically, now, most guys that buy that machine, run that machine, are also guys that do a lot of their own work.
Absolutely, okay? Yeah, no doubt about that.
And that market is driven by those guys. Well, shit, we've fixed our own combine for 40 years. Why would we stop now? Especially when, regardless of color, everybody's shop rate's 100 something nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
And there's just plain ass guys that like tinkering. You know, they like wrenching.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when they can, you know, they got a nice shop, they pull that thing in there, they get it, they slap her back together with the new stuff, and away we go. Those guys are typically not set in stone, but typically can do that for 10 a year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that, because they're throwing out the labor part. Labor's, whatever the parts are, usually the labor's that again. So it's just, that's
yep.
pretty
20,
typical.
20 years ago,
Yep.
when I started in this business, it was a rule of thumb, and it was that way for probably 15 years. Your combine bill is half parts, half labor, and no matter how you slice it, it always works out that way.
Yeah. Yep, that's true.
That was just always a rule of thumb.
Okay. Yeah.
Nowadays, it's about 60-40 or 65-35.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about tractors now, whether it's row crop or four-wheel drive. Obviously, four-wheel drives have a little more maintenance just because of the articulation points and those kind of things. Got a lot more tires and everything else going around it, but those...
Hey, real quick,
Yeah.
I would just like to take a big giant exhale that we're not talking about combines again. Okay, continue.
Yeah, no, you take a look at tractors, right? So row crop four-wheel drive tractors, I mean, I don't think either one of them really matter, but for the most part there, that depreciation curve is a lot more of a hindrance longer than anything else. I mean, row crop tractors don't fall on their face as fast as combines do, right? Four-wheel drive, same way.
Right.
They don't do that. So, but also on the flip side of that is there's not a lot to go wrong. I mean, obviously there's stuff to go wrong with them, but there's not wear items, and you're not running crop through it and those kind of things. So you have an opportunity to kind of ride the depreciation curve out a lot further and really get a good number of hours out of a piece of equipment before you trade it in. And to me, I think you could run a row crop tractor or a four-wheel drive tractor, something like that, for 2,000 to 2,500 hours. And to me, I think that's when you've got the meat out of the machine, if you bought it new, right?
Right.
Obviously, there's guys out there looking for 500-hour machines and 1,000-hour machines and those kind of things. But typically, in today's world, in the situation we're in right now, there's a lot of 6,000-hour machines out there that guys are trading in to find a 2,000-hour machine or a 2,500-hour machine.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think, to me, now, if you had asked me this in 2012, I'd have said, get it out of that machine at 500 to 750 hours. And that's the best time to trade your machine. To me, as I look at it now, I kind of feel like that 2,000, 2,500 is a sweet spot on tractors right now. What are you thinking?
I would agree with that. What I would tell the customer is right under 2.
Yeah.
Just because, not that there's a hell of a lot of difference between 1850 and 2000. There's virtually no difference.
Yeah.
But for us, the resale ability of it, it's a big psychological game.
Yeah, that under 2,000 hour mark is a big psychological thing. It's like on a car. It's not so much like that anymore, but I remember when I was a kid growing up, my dad said, we got to get rid of this truck at 100,000 miles. I mean, just no one's going to want to buy it after that, and now, I mean, no one really pays much attention to that. But it's the same thing. Like, if you're at 85,000 miles and this one over here is at 92,000 miles, it's 7,000 miles difference, right? I'm thinking I'm 15,000 miles away from 100,000 instead of, 8. And it's a huge thing in your head that you're like, I'm willing to pay a little extra to get this one than I am that one. And I think there's something to that. And that is a big thing that is going on. And also, too, the other side of that is, depending on what you've done with the machine, at 2,000 hours, 2,500 hours, you're starting to look at needing to replace tires. And that is a wicked expensive thing on a tractor.
Yeah, it is. That'd be a good opportunity for you to give your sponsor a shout out.
Give Dawsontire a call about when you get to that 2,000 hour range.
There you go. That's wicked expensive, unless you call Dawsontire, Gothenburg, Nebraska.
They're damn near free.
Yeah, you're right there. There's a lot of stuff. Not a lot of anything really, honest to God, happens up to 2.
Right.
After 2, at least it shouldn't. Which, case in point, what's new warranty on a tractor? Oh, 2,000 hours. Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah. They might know something.
Yeah, exactly. Now I've seen 6,000 hour rigs that have never seen a wrench.
Oh yeah.
Other than just being serviced, maybe a line or a fitting, but that's it. And I've seen 1,000-hour tractors that, my God, what happened to this thing? It just like anything else. But by and large, I agree. No reason not to run to 2 at all. Again, other than the multi-unit thing and all that. But
right. Yeah.
Because there's just some guys set up that way, and once you're set up that way, that's life.
Right.
Barring catastrophe.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you get, so say you're over 2, 2 to 3, I kind of broad stroke that before, 3 to 4, kind of the same thing.
Right.
Now, when you're talking a 20 or 30 series, I think there's, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm just throwing it out there. If you take 5,000 hours versus 6,000 hours on a 8,020 series or 8,030 series, I think there's a bigger difference there than on a first or second gen 8R. Take a 8360.
Yeah.
5,000 hours on an 8360, 6,000 hours on an 8360. Not a real big difference. Okay.
Yep.
But you look at 5,000 hours on a ILS IVT 8330 or 6,000 hours on that same tractor.
Yep.
There's a bigger difference there than there is in the R.
Yep. And you're talking to the upside, right?
Huh?
You're talking to the upside, right? Because that's the idea of what that machine is and where it's at as far as popularity goes, right?
Yeah. What I'm saying is, at 5, that thing has a premium.
Right. Yep.
At 6, it does not at all.
Especially for those guys out there, there's still a very proud few that think when you say deaf, it means that you have a hard time hearing. So they will not put it on their tractor. They don't want anything to do with it. And I think that those machines that you see them at the auction all the time that sell for this exorbitant amount of money. They got 6,000 hours on them, and I'm like, man, this is really, really a hard thing to do. But I get where they're coming from. An 8420 was a pretty decent tractor. The 30 series tractors are pretty good. Those were some good, reliable machines, and guys are just looking at it from a standpoint of why, if I can get 6,000 for something I like versus something that I don't know much about or not feel comfortable with or whatever it is. The devil you know is better than the devil that you don't know, I guess. So it's
well, and what I would say quick there, the 30 series tractors and the 70 series combines, my God, we all know everybody was just gaga to the moon, in love with them things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that has tapered off quite a bit, along with the deaf thing, because deaf's been in pickups for ages, and so many guys have diesel pickups,
Right.
So they're dealing with it, and deaf's been, we're 6 model years into deaf, at least on the deer side, to having deaf on, tractors, combines.
Right.
So they're, and you take a 14 370, a 14 680, you are damn sure talking commodity numbers at that point, and that's gotten guys over it a little bit. You look at, say, a year ago this time, a 5,000 hour 30 series brought at least 10 to 15% more than a 5,000 hour R series.
Right.
And that's just why. And it wasn't that they were DEF R's, they just had the diesel particulate filter on there. But it's still something else to worry about. So they took their, they perfected the 8400, I will run this tractor till I die type of tractor. And that propped a lot of that up, but there's just so much out there. They're getting so old, which is funnier than shit because I'll never own one, but they're getting so old that they have no choice but to absorb that downward push of everything that has a letter in the model number,
Right, yeah.
S's and R's. So that's kind of worn off a lot, but our old buddy Greg Peterson, once a week, something,
Right.
somebody somewhere paid 8 times what something's worth just because, look at what a new one costs, Like that's the 4440 argument. Well, look at what a new one costs.
Online
well,
service.
Okay. I get that. I totally get that. But I'd damn sure rather sit in a 6M than a 4440 all day.
Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely right.
And that's coming from a guy that likes cold iron,
Right.
But I'm also 6'6", 285, and you climb in there and spin around and sit down, and like I always joke when I get in a little car, be like, oh, hold on, let me put this car on.
Right. Yeah.
The Sound Guard cab's kind of the same way, so. You always have that kind of stuff out there, too, and that has nothing to do. That is actually complete opposite of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But, if I was to broad stroke the tractor thing, as far as from the customer standpoint when to trade, run that thing to 2. Why the hell not?
Yeah.
So if you really got to, run it to 1,000.
Right.
And there's any more, depending on what that tractor's doing, how big an outfit they are, and all that kind of stuff. We're talking 1 year or 2 years, quite honestly.
Yeah,
we got plenty of customers that a 1 year old 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
A 2 year old's 2,000 hours.
Yep. You got dairies that are 1 year's 2,500 hours. So I mean, just
right.
Get ready. But no, so I guess kind of to wrap this whole thing up, I think when you're out looking at a piece of equipment, and the first thing I take into consideration is where is it at in the depreciation curve, and how's that depreciation curve going to be affected by the reconditioning costs. And if there's no real cost in the depreciation, that means that you're going to have the reconditioning cost is going to be significantly higher for you than any number of hours that you put on a machine. And then and the flip side of that is if you're in that depreciation curve and you're in the heat of the depreciation curve, typically you're not going to have a lot of reconditioning costs, typically. But I think that's but there are finite points in time when it makes sense for you to trade. And it really doesn't make you sense to really trade in between there if you don't have to.
Yeah. The only thing I would say, because you said the depreciation curve and the big reconditioning bills are not hand in hand, right? You were talking about them being on opposite ends of the spectrum. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah. Meaning that if you have if you have a 2 or 3 year old machine, your depreciation cost is going to be so much higher than what your reconditioning cost is, because you're not going to have much.
Right. The only thing I would say, the only time that is not, or that has nothing to do with what you said. What I was getting at is, when you look at the double whammy, is that 1,300, 1,500 hour combine. Because if you're the guy getting rid of it, ouch. If you're the guy buying it, ouch.
Well, yeah.
That's one that on that spectrum gets you coming and going versus the rest are kind of one side or the other.
So that's my point. When you get to that, if you've kept that machine past the 7, just pretend you bought it brand new, and you've kept it past the 750-hour mark, 800-hour mark, and you did that chunk of reconditioning, and then you ran it again to 1,300 or 1,500, and you haven't done anything with it yet, you need to start thinking about that. Because that is,
right.
You're going to get it again,
yep.
right? So I think at that point, though, if you really step back and take a look at the machine and what you've done with it, you've made your money back, right? Because your throughput and all these different things, and that you can weigh and measure, and cost per bushel, and those different things that all start playing into that. You've actually probably you're in a good spot, right? Your depreciation from a tax standpoint and from a machine depreciation standpoint, you got to get out of it, and now you're down to having a machine that's actually paid for itself, not because you paid it off, but because you've used it enough that your efficiencies have actually increased, and you've made your money through that side of it. So I mean, I think you've gotten the good out of the machine at that interval. If you're going to keep it, you better run it again at 2,500 hours, because now you got to redo it all over again and regain your money and your depreciation costs and all the different stuff. Get the good out of the parts you put in there and those kind of things.
The only thing I would interject on that is, and I've had some guys do this, and the guys that do it, I love it, but a lot of guys have a hard time wrapping their head around it, is you take that, say, 1,200 hour combine, and you go ahead and you spend that big ass kicking Recon bill on it, then run it just one more year.
Yeah.
You get your goodie back out of it for what the shop ticket was. Plus, it's still in pretty damn good shape, right for trading.
Yep. Absolutely right.
A lot of guys, I've had some guys do that. Works great for them, works great for us. Perfect. It's a win-win.
Right.
But a lot of guys can't wrap their head around it, or choose not to wrap their head around it, for the sake of saying, I just paid $25,000 in the shop for that thing. I'm not going to run it a year and trade it. I'm going to milk the shit out of it again.
Right.
Well, okay, then what? You going to do it again, or dump it when it's that way and you're down to nothing?
Yep. You've knocked the you knocked the sheen off the parts you put on there now. So now you've got a good used machine at that point. That's right. Really in that sweet spot. But knowing where those sweet spots are is so important.
Sell a combine to somebody. What'd you say, Casey?
I said just knowing where those sweet spots are so important.
Right. Yeah. What I was going to say, just real quick there, I have yet to sell a combine to a guy and him say, God, I hope that hasn't been through the shop.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's
I want that with sharp augers and holes in the auger trough. Be like, all right, here we go.
I'm augering grapefruit, so I don't need that tightness.
Yeah.
To auger to.
Well, yeah. I need more clearance.
All right. Well, good stuff, dude.
Oh, goodness.
If folks want to reach out to you and pick your brain about some more of that stuff, or just get some of those super sweet deals you have out there in the old Twitterverse, what's the best way to do it?
Well, I'm pretty active on the Twitterverse there, and you can get a hold of me at Aaron Centel on there, or like a lot of guys do, call me, text me, don't matter when, just let it rip, 308-760-1193.
Right on, man. And I'm Casey Seymour. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Also, check out movingironllc.com for the latest Moving Iron information. Also, the upcoming Moving Iron Summit, September 1 through 3 in Nashville, Tennessee. Everything's on, so if you want to come to that, man, reach out to me, and I'll get you the information on that. Send me an email at movingironpodcast@movingironpodcast.com. Also, check out the Global Ag Network and the great podcasters out there as well. Brent and Landon over at the Dryland Farmer Podcast they're pretty funny fellows, so check them out. I enjoyed listening to that podcast. Also, if you
they are pretty funny, but looks aren't everything.
And great faces for radio. They have. The other thing too is if you're listening to this and you've heard me talk about tractorzoom, I'll be honest with you, I think it's one of the best things out there. I've used it. I've kicked it around at the dealership, tried to find every possible way to find something wrong with it, and I haven't found one yet. And I think so. If you're an auction guy, if you're an equipment appraiser, if you're a dealership guy, if you're just a farmer out there that's trying to keep up on what's going on, check out TractorZoom. It's the most concise place to find what's going on in the auction market. There's about 400 different auctioneers that report to them what's going on and what's sold there, and they have a pretty good way to kind of filter out what you're looking for. So check it out and see what you like from it. So I guess with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Iron Film. Let's move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here.